The US has been one of the best performing regions compared to the rest of the world in recent years, but with valuations starting to feel slightly overinflated, an increasing number of investors are asking how they can reduce their US exposure in their portfolio. There are a few different ways you can do this, one of which is using global funds that exclude the US. This doesn't mean you need to remove all US exposure from your portfolio, it just means you get to choose the weighting, but of course that's up to you. In a typical global ETF, the US makes up about 60% of the fund, causing some investors to question whether they should be reducing their exposure. I should say this has actually come down from earlier in the year when it was up towards 62 and 63%, and that reflects a slight underperformance from the US compared to the rest of the world. Global ETFs, like a lot of ETFs, are generally market cap weighted, and that means they adjust over time depending on how different regions perform. So the better performing region, their percentage and their weighting of the fund will gradually grow over time, and obviously vice versa for regions that underperform. So if you don't have a particularly strong opinion on where you want exposure, to be honest, you're just better sticking with a standard global ETF that will adapt as time goes on. But what some people like to do is try to preempt some of these changes, which is obviously more of an active decision. And there's a few different ways that we can do this. One of the more granular ways to do this is to split a global ETF into 6 different regions, and then you can allocate your preferred weighting. The 6 different regions would be North America, developed Europe excluding UK, emerging markets, Japan, developed Asia Pacific excluding Japan, and then the FTSE 100 to cover the UK market. And these global weightings are what they currently make up in a global ETF. So from there, you can then choose your weightings accordingly. But of course, this is a very active approach and it also requires you having an opinion on other regions of the world. But if you're looking at this purely because you want to reduce your US exposure, then your best bet is to use a global ETF that excludes the US. For UK and European investors, these are the 3 largest world ETFs that exclude the USA. They're all virtually the same, there's nothing to choose between them, so it just comes down to your preferred provider. The iShares fund hasn't got any performance data because it's less than a year old, and generally I wouldn't recommend a fund that's that young. I want to see some track record, but it's iShares and it's a tracker fund. We don't have to worry about reliability. So pick any of these 3, they're pretty much all the same. And then to go along with one of these funds, you would then pick an S&P 500 ETF that would cover your US exposure, and then you can choose the weightings accordingly. However, it's not that simple because the only world ETFs that are available to us are these funds that track the MSCI World Index. And a key thing with MSCI is that their World ETF only covers developed markets. MSCI do have an index that includes the whole world, the All Country World Index, and FTSE also have their equivalent as well, the FTSE All World. But there's none that exclude the USA. So if you want a truly global portfolio, you also need to add an emerging markets ETF. If you really want to simplify your investing, I have a free ETF cheat sheet that you can download. It breaks down the most popular ETFs in different regions and different sectors, makes it easy to compare. It's the top link in the description below. When combining developed and emerging markets ETFs in a portfolio, it's important that we use just MSCI or just FTSE. We can't use one of each. And that's because of the difference in how MSCI and FTSE classify specific countries. For example, FTSE classifies South Korea as a developed market, whereas MSCI still classify them as a developed market. So in this case, because we're using MSCI World funds, we also need to look for an MSCI Emerging Market fund. Generally, I would just pick a big provider like iShares and just use their MSCI Emerging Markets ETF. Emerging markets currently make up just over 10% of a global ETF. So if you were to combine that with the existing weightings in a global ETF, where the US makes up about 60%, the remaining 30% would then be the rest of the world. So depending on how much you want to reduce your US exposure, you can then decide where you want to allocate it. It could be you want to put it all in developed markets, it could be you want to put it all in emerging, and of course you could have a more balanced approach. It really comes down to which region you think is going to outperform in the future. Again, this is not going to be for everyone because it is more of an active decision. And if you don't have a strong opinion, you should simply just stick with a global ETF. And you also have to think about reweighting this portfolio, maybe every 6 to 12 months, because different regions in the portfolio are going to perform different to the weightings that you set. So if you want to keep the same weightings, you're going to have to sell some ETFs and buy some others to keep those weightings in check. If you want to discuss this further, we can do so in my free Discord community, which you can join using the top link down below. I hope you found that useful, and I'll catch you in the next one.